Hello, hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming. I see a lot of people coming in. This is so exciting. Hello, hello. Okay, I'm assuming you all probably just got my final reminder email and you're clicking the link. Love to see so many faces joining us here today. Thank you for coming. Definitely keep yourselves on mute during this session. That would be so helpful for me. Oh yeah, lots of friends coming. Yes, thank you for coming. Hello everybody. Hello everybody. I'm so excited to share this session with you. This has just been a long time coming, so I'm just so excited. And I can't believe it's finally here. Thank you for coming. Hello everybody. Okay. Wow. Thank you so much. I'm seeing so many people coming in. This is so exciting. I am a huge fan of starting promptly. So, I just really like to hop right in and, before we really get started, I would love it if everybody would please write in the chat what organization you're representing, maybe a little bit about your mission. I love to kind of have this idea of like the big impact that we're having in the room today. So I would just go ahead and drop your name and, your organization, maybe even where you're calling in from. But yeah, let's hear those missions. Go ahead and let us know. And then just so you all know, my colleague Jade is on and she's going to be helping me out by dropping some links in the chat. She's going to be taking all your questions and putting them where I can answer them for you later. So if you see her writing in the chat, that is what she's doing. So hi Jade, thanks for doing that. I see some of my other MemoryFox colleagues on here. Welcome. All right. Okay. Oh, here we go. Now we got some missions. I love that. Yes, keep them coming. Keep them coming. Thank you so much for coming. Okay. Well, like I said, we have so much to cover today. I am a huge fan of, starting promptly. So I'm actually just going to get started right now. And I look forward to even more people joining us. But yes, this session is being recorded. You will all receive a recording after, in a follow-up email. And also, before we get started, again, I just want to let you know, this is our first time presenting this topic. So there is actually going to be a survey at the end of this session that I would be so, so grateful if you would please fill it out. Let us know what you loved about the session. Let us know what we can improve on. That would truly be so helpful. So yeah, like I said, thank you for joining me today for From Survey to Solutions. We're going to talk about the ethical storytelling report. And before we talk about the report, I do want to take a minute to introduce myself. I recognize some names on here, but there's a lot of people that I'm not sure if you know me. So my name's Carly Euler. I'm the marketing manager here at MemoryFox. I organized and created the 2023 Ethical Storytelling Report. We launched the report in January, this past January, and to date, we've had over 1,300 downloads. A little bit about me personally, I have worked in the nonprofit space for 9 years. When I did that, I specialized in communications, peer-to-peer campaigns, sponsorships, and special events, probably similar to a lot of the jobs, a lot of you who are here today. And some of the organizations that I worked at and volunteered for include the Breast Cancer Coalition, CODA Support Foundation, the Wiley Network, Kenya Lacrosse Association, and the BOMA Project. So I've experienced a lot of different missions, and I'd love, like I said, I love hearing about your mission. So go ahead and keep dropping those in the chat. Okay, before we dive into the actual contents of the report, I think it's super important to let you know, how did we even get here? So here's our backstory. In 2023, our team identified a prominent pattern. What happened was that every single speaking engagement, whether it was a panel, whether it was in person, whether it was a webinar, we were asked this same thoughtful question. What can I do if the people I serve have sensitive stories they might not want to share? And truth be told, at the time, we didn't really have a good answer. So we kind of thought, we could take two routes, right? We could continue to kind of give a little answer, maybe try to skirt around the question, or we could try to face it head on, do some learning, and figure out a really good answer to share with you all. So we decided to do that. We embarked on a learning journey, and we thought,
I went to the
what better?
shop.
Oh, please mute yourself.
Buy me a drink now for myself.
Jade, will you go ahead and mute some of our participants? Thank you. And so we just thought, what better way to learn about this topic than to ask some of the experts? So we did so by putting together a December panel that we hosted this last December. So what we did was we invited 4 exceptional storytelling experts. These are people who have dedicated their whole careers to answering questions like this. And we just said, hey, join us for a virtual panel, and we're going to get questions from the nonprofit audience, and we're going to ask them directly to you. So yeah, we set up sort of an Ask Me Anything style panel with 4 panelists. It was going to be 60 minutes. We thought, easy peasy, we're going to knock this out. We're going to answer all the questions, right? But then our team was super floored when we had over 400 people register for this event. And with their registrations, there were 150 really multifaceted, tough questions. So it became very abundantly clear to us that, we really had to find a way to continue this discussion. So while our hour-long panel was a super, super successful event, you can watch the recording. We actually decided that it just barely skimmed the surface. So we had to find a way to make sure that we could continue to have the conversation going all year long. And that's where the ethical storytelling report came in. So if you haven't had a chance to download it yet, go ahead and scan that QR code, or Jade's gonna drop the link in the chat as well. Go ahead and get your copy right now. What we did was we took matters into our own hands. We created the report, and I'm so excited to share it with you today. So, one thing that we really sought to understand when we opened up the report was we wanted to see how the nonprofit community currently felt about their relationship with ethical storytelling. And to do so, we had to conduct a survey. Please raise your hand in the chat if you participated in our survey, or if you're interested in participating in our survey next year. That's also, I'd love to hear that as well. Oh, good, I've got one hand raised. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for doing that. Okay, let's dive into the survey results. Oh yeah, 2 hands. Okay, wonderful. So we have some survey results here. First, our very first question was we wanted to understand how important ethical storytelling was to the survey taker as an individual. So to the nonprofit professionals taking this, we wanted to see like how important this even was to them. So we asked them on a scale of 1 to 5, how important is ethical storytelling to you personally? The really cool thing that we are so proud to report is that every single person that we surveyed either rated ethical storytelling as a 3 or greater. So as you can see from this chart, the vast majority, about 88%, they actually determined that ethical storytelling was extremely important to them. And, much smaller, but coming in at the number 4 slot was just 10% that believe it's very important. But we really wanted to understand if people's individual values differ from how they perceive the values of their organization to be. So we asked respondents if they could please rate how important they believe ethical storytelling is to their organization. So this is how they perceive ethical storytelling is to their organization. And while these charts do trend in the same direction, it is very notable to see that the answers, when you're referring to the organization, they're actually skewed much lower. There was only 73% of people reported that they think their organization finds ethical storytelling extremely important. So So one thing that we really believe here at MemoryFox is that ethical storytelling begins during the story collection process. So we wanted to see what nonprofits thought about that. And therefore, we asked them on a scale of 1 to 5, how equipped do you feel to actually collect and share stories in an ethical way? You can see here that just 9% of respondents feel that their story collection is currently extremely ethical, while the vast majority, people were most likely to answer that they only felt a little equipped to tell stories ethically. So the interesting thing here, we really just wanted to see, we clearly can see here that nonprofits don't necessarily feel like they have a great way to collect and share stories in an ethical way. And that is just something we weren't really sure that we weren't really sure what the results would be here. So this is very interesting data for us. But another thing that we know here at MemoryFox is that the most important part of the story collection process is the actual consent. And the cool thing is, we proved in our report that you all as nonprofits actually believe that as well. In fact, we had 88.7% who noted that it is extremely important to them, 7.7%, which is much lower, but of course, we love that the majority is extremely important, but 7.7% admitted that it's very important to them. And we also had a couple people that said it was a little important. So then we determined that just because you believe that consent is extremely important, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're collecting consent regularly. We wanted to see if it did. So we asked survey respondents to share if they felt their organization had a solid system in place. Now, as you can see here, these charts are vastly different. So even though in our first chart, 90% of people reported that consent's extremely important, when you're looking at people who are actually doing this currently, only 20% feel that they have a good system in place to do so. When it came to this question, you can see most people were most likely going to say that they agreed that their system was okay for collecting consent. But kind of discouragingly, there was 5% that said they actually strongly disagree that at the moment they are collecting consent in a solid way. So I think it's very easy to concur here that consent is something that many organizations feel they really need to improve on. Now let's move to something just a little bit more uplifting. When we asked if they were interested in learning how to tell stories more ethically, it's really exciting to see that nearly 80% stated that they were extremely interested in learning more. And I think that this is just such a good point because we know from reports like this that there's not one single way to tell stories ethically, and there are new strategies emerging every single day. So it's really great that people are so willing to learn more. But when we wanted to look out and ask people, on a scale of 1 to 5, do you feel like you understand trauma-informed language? We actually determined that there is a big learning gap that currently exists. So only 12.5% reported that they actually feel very confident with trauma-informed language. And 39.7% said they only feel confident sometimes. So even if someone is very interested in learning about a topic, that doesn't necessarily mean there is adequate, equitable, educational resources that are available to them. To us, that is such a clear indication that our sector really needs a greater amount of ethical storytelling resources. Okay, and then we wrapped up our survey with this huge list of things people could feel about ethical storytelling. We simply asked people, check all that apply. Coming in strong at number 1, we found 58% of people said that they actually struggle with wanting to collect stories from their community while doing no harm. So 58%, that's a lot of people. And I bet if you're watching this right now, this might resonate with you. I want you to know that obviously there are a lot of other people that are feeling this way. So please, please, please don't feel like you're the only one who is quote unquote doing this wrong. You have seriously come to the right place. I've got a lot of strategies for you. But before we dig into that, I want to share the other top 4 feelings that people reported, which is really great that they all have a positive connotation. So coming in at the second highest percentage, we had 56% of people said, I do not feel pressure to tell sad, traumatic stories to raise more funds. That's really great news. Very close behind at 55%. We had people that said, hey, I have actually set aside time to educate myself about these topics. Just a little bit lower, we had at 46% that the respondents feel that the culture of storytelling at their organization is trauma informed. And then last of the top 5 feelings, 41% said, I know the way we collect stories from our community is ethical. So I think like these percentages are very large. They're really exciting to see these positive emotions also on this chart. And I have a feeling that when we do this survey again in 2024, these numbers will increase. Okay, but let's talk about the bulk of the report, which is the pages and pages of questions that were answered, or of questions that were asked by nonprofit professionals like you, followed by the answers that we sourced from experts for you. So just as a heads up of how the rest of this session is going to go, the next portion is all broken down by topic. So the actual report, as well as this session, it was broken down into the next 8 topics, and we're just going to talk about kind of the biggest takeaways from each topic. Before we do that, though, you're probably wondering, okay, who even answered these questions? Who even gave up these insights and experiences? Well, big thank you to these thought leaders and consultants for all of their hard work and dedication to answering your questions, as well as some boots on the ground nonprofit professionals over here on the left, as well, and in addition to my own MemoryFox colleagues who, work with customers all the time about these storytelling. So again, thank you all for contributing. So appreciated. Okay, topic number 1, let's talk about ethical storytelling. Obviously the whole report is about ethical storytelling, but this is kind of the overview of the topic as a whole. When we are looking at the topic of ethical storytelling, there really were some recurring themes that came up again and again throughout the entire report. When I was going through the report, these 4 things truly stuck out to me as the top level things about ethical storytelling. So number 1, you want to consider crafting an ethical storytelling standards guide. So we're going to talk later about the 8 features that you can put in your guide, but definitely that is something you probably want to consider doing at your nonprofit. Next, please be upfront with all of the options you can offer your storyteller. So what are your options for anonymity, for example? What platforms do you think you'll share their story on? Do they have a time frame for how long you can use their story? When you are laying all of these options out and showing your intentions very upfront, that is what's going to make you a trustworthy story steward. Third, this topic comes up again and again and again, but definitely always give the storyteller the final yes or no. There is simply no deadline that's more important than being a good steward of sensitive stories. And number 4, we have a whole section about this, but consent. This honestly came up in so many answers, and yeah, we're going to talk about it a little bit later. So that was a quick high level about ethical storytelling. But one aspect of ethical storytelling that I actually think doesn't get considered enough is from the reader's perspective. And our friend Maria Bryan has done a really particularly good job at getting this aspect more widespread and just better understood. So when asked, what is the best way to share stories while still being sensitive towards triggering others? Maria Bryan said, content warnings allow us to share lived experiences while supporting the individual agency and the well-being of our audience. So what she means by the well-being of your audience is that when you clearly label distressing material, you're giving the story consumer the ability to choose if they would like to continue or not. That's going to build trust with your brand. It's going to make people really believe that you are, telling stories the most ethical way, and you're also taking into account their feelings. And let's talk about when this might come into play. So these are some of our recommendations for when you want to consider putting a content warning on a story. The topics that we would include are sexual assault, domestic abuse or child abuse, animal cruelty or animal death, self-harm or suicide, eating disorders, and violence. So there are obviously many other topics you could add to this list. There's maybe even some specific to your mission that would make sense for you all to put as a procedure. But I think just in general, especially with the internet and people scrolling by, just trying to go about their day, you just never know who might be triggered by your story. And you just want to be, you don't want to put them in a position where they might feel like your nonprofit is putting them in a place where they're going to be triggered. Okay, let's get to topic number 2, where we're going to talk about changing the narrative from negative to positive. When we think about changing the narrative from negative to positive, what we're going to talk about today is from your perspective as a nonprofit, especially if you have some sort of failure that has happened. So the question that we posed was, how do I tell stories about our failures, but in a positive light? And our friend Marcella Zafra, she actually said, when I fail, I see this as an opportunity to be more creative, to innovate, find a different way to achieve my goal. And I think that's such good advice to keep in mind. And when you are looking to actually take a story that could be about failure and actually turn it into something that's more positive, there are 4 questions that you can use to actually guide that story to be a positive story worth sharing. So first, what have you learned? Second, what blind spots do you see now? Third, how did that failure cause you to adjust your approach? And fourth, what are you looking forward to in the future? The thing is, everything will not go exactly as you imagined at your nonprofit. I'm sure you all know that. Maybe your program didn't work as quickly as you had hoped. Maybe your event didn't raise as much money as you had hoped. Maybe your capital campaign fell a little short of your goal. Whatever that might be, you do kind of owe your audience that story. And I think that's a really interesting story to tell. When you do choose to tell these stories about failure and making them a little more positive, you're actually going to boost transparency, and you're ultimately going to set yourself on a path forward to success. And one of my friends, Jordan Corcoran, she was a contributor to the report, but she wrote, just remember that failure is actually part of the journey. Okay, moving right along to topic number 3, let's talk about trauma-informed language. Question that we posed to the people who answered our report. How do you balance being emotionally appealing to the audience without capitalizing on trauma? I've got just a few suggestions for you when if you're thinking that this might be something that happens at your organization. So number 1, you want to consider the golden rule. I think we probably all remember learning the golden rule when we were in kindergarten or 1st grade. And the golden rule is treat others the way you want to be treated, right? We've all heard this a million times. At least I have. And I think that this is a really good rule of thumb when it comes to storytelling as well. Before you actually share a story, I challenge you to think about if you or a loved one of yours were the main character. Is this how you would want your story told? And if there's any part of you that hesitates, it's time to relook at that story, maybe make some changes. But again, just consider what it would be like if you were the person in that story. That's how we're going to consider the golden rule. Next, when we're talking about emotionally appealing stories, I think it's so important to remember that positive emotions are still emotions, and that the word emotion, it's not synonymous with sadness or despair or anger. There's a whole spectrum of emotions that can inspire audiences to give. And like for me personally, when I think about impactful storytelling, my favorite emotions to elicit are hope and relief. When you are thinking of writing a story in a way that gives the donor hope for the future, or maybe you're providing like hope because there's a long-term solution to this problem, you really are inspiring those people to give again and again, because they're going to feel really inspired by the future and by the real impact that you're making long-term. Third consideration is that big trauma is not a necessity in all stories. I think we tend to think that emotionally appealing stories have to be about big trauma or like really, really serious issues. But that's not necessarily true. Our stories, they don't have to always be as traumatic or as awful as we might think. Instead, we can tell stories on a much smaller scale, especially if we're willing to invest some time into being creative and really trust the power of storytelling on its own. Finally, words matter, even if you don't know the right ones. So what I mean by that is it's really okay to just be upfront and vulnerable with your storytellers. If you're not sure if you have the right language, be upfront about it and just tell them. Whether it's because of a situation they've been through, or maybe it's their background, or it's their race, or their gender, or maybe their physical status, you can always approach it with humility and honesty. And yeah, that is the thing. The thing about this one is just that, again, we're all just still learning here. So it's really okay to just admit, you know, I don't always have the right language, or I'm not sure if I have the right language, and have a discussion about that. No, I already mentioned our friend Maria Bryan. She, as I said, has been doing really, really great work in the trauma-informed space. I highly recommend working with her if you have specific questions about trauma-informed language. But she actually has this great checklist of how to make sure before you start an interview with somebody you want to collect a story from, here's a checklist of how you're going to make sure that it is trauma-informed. So your trauma-informed pre-interview prep checklist. So first, just make sure you explain the process and make sure that you are obtaining enthusiastic consent. Second, definitely allow for your storyteller to select the location where you're going to be collecting that story. Third, you can ask if they would like to have a support person, such as a close friend or a family member, attend the interview as well. Fourth, you can ask about the potential triggers that you should avoid, and then definitely make sure you tailor those questions to actually avoid those. Fifth, have referral information ready. So this is something I haven't really thought about before, but this was such an important point. You know, have resources for affordable counseling, support groups, crisis hotlines, other relevant, maybe community resources that are easy to be a part of. Have those readily available for maybe after the interview, just so people are aware of them. Next, you really want to start your interview. I hope this isn't news, but you want to start your interview by having a real conversation, because that's really going to help people ease in and, you know, be familiar with you before they'll start recounting traumatic memories. And then, of course, we want to make sure that you are always offering breaks and giving your storyteller space to take breaks if they need to. Okay, so we talked about the pre-interview process. Next, there are some considerations to take when you are actually doing the story writing and the actual story sharing. So our friend Sabrina, she has a few tips here for how best to make sure that you're actually story writing and sharing is trauma informed. So first one, like we already kind of talked about, making sure you have those content warnings or that is going to point out anything that is sensitive. Second, we're going to use strength-based language when we're writing stories. So you want to focus on strengths, resilience, positive aspects of the community journey. Third, we're going to use first-person language. So what that means is you want to make sure, or I'm sorry, person-first language. And what that means is you want to make sure that you have your language is prioritizing the individual first, and then the challenges as a smaller part of the story. But the person is the first part of the story. Fourth, we're going to talk about safety prioritization. You really want to make sure that you highlight how your storyteller considers the emotional and physical safety of your community members. So if you've already discussed, so like an example is like if you've already discussed your anonymity options, double check that you've actually met all of those requirements. Next, you want to make sure that you have checked off inclusivity as part of your story writing. So you want to ensure that you're culturally inclusive with all of your examples, with the language you're using, with the visuals that you're representing. And if you're not sure, then I recommend that you ask a trusted colleague for a review before you share. And then, of course, last but not least, no cultural stereotypes. You want to avoid stereotypes that could be culturally insensitive or triggering. We do have a section, we're going to dig into that a little bit later as well. Okay, topic number 4, let's talk about the best practices for story collection. So I added our logo to the bottom of this slide because these 5 keys to ethical story collection are really something that we highly prioritize here at MemoryFox. So number 1, give your community the microphone. The cool thing about today's technology is that you actually don't have to tell people's story for them anymore. When you give your community the opportunity to speak for themselves, you really empower them to tell their own story exactly how they would like it to be told. Second, we're going to encourage people to share when and where they are comfortable. When you allow for this kind of space, you're actually going to reduce the stress on your storyteller, and it's of course going to build trust. Third, we encourage you to be upfront about how you intend to use the story. We talked about this a little bit already, but a good example for something like this is if you're planning to use a story in a grant report versus on social media, there might be some details that your storyteller is more willing to share if in the grant report, because it's going to not be so public as social media. So that's just an example of when you are upfront about it, it might change the story that you collect. Fourth, we do want to use prompts that have strength-based messaging. So think about the questions that you're asking your community, and then think about what those questions actually are going to elicit for responses. Because when you use strength-based prompts, you're likely to get strength-based answers. And finally, you really want to capture stories in real time and all year long. I mean, this is hopefully something that you all are starting to do at your organization, but when you commit to capturing stories all year long, you are avoiding a lot of gaps that can come up when people might not remember exactly what they went through at one point or what they were experiencing while they were doing your program. Instead, when you're going to capture stories all year long, you really are just going to just avoid those gaps. And I have a great example here to show you from one of our friends at Kids Health Connections of a really great story that kind of embodies all of these ethical story collection keys. I'm going to let the video speak for itself.
I love the mentors, and I love that they help me and they motivate me and push me up when I'm feeling down and I stop or I'm say I can't do it. They always say I can't, but I always say I can, but they always say I can do it. Never say you can't. So I love that they motivate me all the time, and we're strong, fit kids.
I love that video. Please drop in the chat what emotions you are feeling after watching that video. I know I've seen this several times, probably 100 times at this point, and it makes me feel just super smiley. I feel like this program, I trust this program. I feel like I trust that that child is having a wonderful time and that it's really doing, you know, if I was a donor, it really is wanting me to, it's making me want to donate again. Okay. Topic number 5 is visual and video storytelling. So somebody, you might be wondering here on the call, what do I do if the people we serve absolutely must remain anonymous? We do recognize that it is not always safe, or it could just be uncomfortable for everyone to appear on camera. So we do recognize that, and we do also want to say that we still think your nonprofit can make compelling videos. So here are a few strategies from the ethical storytelling report. First, you can always record a voiceover testimonial. So if you have a written testimonial that you have consent to use, go ahead and use your own voice to tell that story. Some other options here, you could share an artistic representation. You could use visuals that relate to your mission. Maybe that's something like packing a suitcase, could be a in-progress painting, maybe it's tying a knot, or you could tell the story of an object. So if you are building houses, maybe you tell the story of the hammer. If you are an after school, or if you are a lunch program, maybe you tell the story of the brown paper bag. Maybe you tell the story of a food delivery truck. This was a really fun example that is in the report from our friend Clay Buck. What he said was, Agents of Good in Canada did this brilliantly when they told the story of people experiencing food insecurity through the point of view of the delivery truck. He goes on to say that the key to a story is the character going through conflict, but we can really lessen the visibility of the character and soften the conflict while still telling the truth. I think this is such a great example, and again, just a really creative way to think outside the box, still get your mission across, still tell people exactly the hard work you're doing without putting a person on camera. Some other visual and video storytelling tips we recommend, create a composite video. So a composite video, you might know it more as a highlight reel, but that is something where you combine several short clips of your mission, and you can trim those. You want to trim those to just be the most exciting 3 to 7 seconds. And then you can layer music on top, or you can do a voiceover. So I actually made a composite video for our MemoryFox holiday video this past holiday season. And Jade already dropped it in the chat, but I wrote a blog post of exactly all the steps I did to do it. So you can do this at your nonprofit right now. But let's just watch a clip.
Success stories from far and from near. Now planting, now feeding, now shelter and aid. On veterans, on families, oh, the joy to be made. To the top of the story page, to the top of the wall. Now dash away, dash away, dash away all.
So obviously that is an example that is very much about MemoryFox and what we do here at MemoryFox. But I know you can do this at your nonprofit. And finally, when it comes to visual and video storytelling, I do want to remind you that you are also a storyteller too, and that selfie videos are actually some of the most engaging videos that can be on your social media. So here's my top 10 tips for taking a great selfie video. I also recommend, hey, follow me on TikTok. I'm posting selfie videos all the time. But really, I really want to recommend that you try to feel more comfortable in front of the camera. Try to tell your own stories from your own point of view. People are going to find that really engaging. Okay, topic number 6. Let's talk about consent and privacy. So there is so much to consider when you're thinking about consent and how to collect consent and how to manage consent. But go ahead and read that portion of the report if you want to dig deep. But here are kind of the top 3 keys to consent as we saw from the report. First, you got to consult. You want to consult legal counsel and your state laws. The thing is, state laws are so different, and we just recommend that you make sure that you know exactly what's going on in your state in terms of consent. Additionally, consider consulting an expert. If you are able to add a legal expert to your board, this is a really good way that they can help you out. So yes, definitely number one, consult your legal counsel and state laws. Number two, you want to get written or electronic consent. It is no longer acceptable at all to just rely on verbal or implied consent when it comes to storytelling. If you are in a situation where you are having a huge group gathering and you're not sure how to go about that, I would highly recommend collecting consent while somebody is registering for the event. Let them know there's going to be photos or videos taken and ask them to please sign off on that while they're registering. Or, maybe that day when they show up to the event, make sure that they can sign off on that there in person. I promise you, you'll be really thankful that you did. And then third, this concept that consent is not in perpetuity. So this is something that we have just recently adopted here at MemoryFox, based on the stuff that we learned in the report. But now Jade dropped the link in the chat. You can check out this example. We actually added a consent removal form to our website. So what happens is when somebody gives a story to MemoryFox, they now have the ability to go ahead and remove consent whenever they feel like they want to remove the consent, and we will remove that story. I also think when you're considering that consent's not in perpetuity, it's a good idea to check back in with your storytellers regularly. So especially if it's been a year or so since you first collected or first shared their story, check back in and ask if it's still okay. You actually might be surprised that people might come back and say, I am okay with you still sharing that story. And actually, here's an update. Here's something new you can share. Here's something new about my life that I'd like to share with the audience if people are still interested in hearing about that. That's a really good way that you can continue the story. I think when it comes to consent and privacy, it's also really important to keep your audience in the loop and to set expectations. So Carly Euler made this really great point when she said, instead of saying to your audience, we will not show you actual photos of clients, you could say something like, we respect our clients' privacy and will only show photos in line with this principle. So basically, this is the idea of setting the expectations for your audience, letting them know what they are gonna get from you, and then in that way you don't want to let them know what they're not going to get from you. So we're going to keep it positive. We're just going to let people know, this is what you're seeing and this is why. Okay, let's talk about building a culture of storytelling. We hear this question all the time when we are talking to the nonprofits we work with. How do you convey the importance of collecting stories to our program staff? I've got a few strategies for you. Raise your hand if you've ever felt like maybe when you work in the fundraising department or in the advancement department that sometimes there's just a little bit of a disconnect between you and the program. Go ahead, let me know in the chat if that's happened to you. And here are some strategies that can help you avoid that in the future. So first, you definitely want to let them know, hey, fundraising campaigns that include video receive 114% more than campaigns that don't. So honestly, if you let me collect more stories, that's just going to mean more money and more resources for you to run your programs. Next, when you want to convey the importance of storytelling to your program staff, you want to build trust. So what you're going to do is really go to your program staff and show them how you stay organized. Show them how you handle consent. Show them how you keep those stories in a secure location. When they see that you are being a good story steward, they are very likely to connect you to more stories down the line. Similarly to how we discussed selfie videos before, don't forget that your program staff also have great stories to tell. So, those people, they know better than anybody the impact that your nonprofit is having, like boots on the ground work. So it really is a great idea to capture their passion through their stories as well. Fourth, you just want to promote transparency. And to do this, you just need to be upfront with your storyteller, or as we already discussed, being upfront with your storytellers about your process, your anonymity, and your timeline. Do the same thing with your program staff. Your fellow staff members, let them in on the storytelling plan. Let them know how this process works. And when they understand the process, when you show them that back-end transparency, they're going to feel more trustworthy. They're going to be more trusted to connect you with more stories. And then, of course, we just need to, try to overcome those barriers by reminding them, we are one team, we have one goal. And it's really important to consider making storytelling an organization-wide policy. So you might be wondering, how do I do that? I mentioned at the top that I do have 8 things that you need to have in your ethical storytelling guide. So this list is something that we put together from the ethical storytelling report from bits and pieces everywhere, but this is really just the 8 things that you want to make sure that you definitely have in your guide. So first, you want your deficit-based key phrases to avoid. So that could be how you used to talk about your programs. It could be maybe something that you used to say that you're no longer going to say. But really important second piece is make sure you have those strength-based alternatives. So people don't just feel like you're leaving them with nothing to say, give them something to replace it. Third, I think it's a really good idea to dig in deeper with full sentence examples using your new language. So really letting people know this is exactly how we are planning to talk about ourselves in the future. Oh, next is you want to make sure your you want to have your communication guidelines listed by channel. So if there's for some reason, any reason why your socials might be written in a different way than your emails, you want to make sure that that is set in stone. Another thing that is a really great idea to include in your guide is a link to other examples of organizations that are really doing this really well. One organization that I highly recommend is Horizons National. They have this really great strength-based messaging guide that they send to all of their affiliates. And I've seen this in person. I've seen these people actually read this guide and they really take it in. And it's just a really phenomenal guide. So go check out Horizons National. But yeah, find some other organizations that you find inspiring, put it in your guide. Next, you definitely want to include some exercises that people can actually practice this in real time. So when they're speaking, how are we going to start using this new language when we are meeting people at happy hour, when we're meeting people at a conference? Then you definitely want to show those exercises to your staff, to your board, to your volunteers, so they can also practice. Next, you want to make sure you have a commitment to reevaluation. So like I said, strategies are changing every day. So you want to make sure that you are regularly checking back in to see if you need to update anything. And then finally, I recommend that you have people sign this document. When people actually sign the document, that's how you're going to gather buy-in. That's what's actually going to make people say, you know what, I have read this and I'm committing myself to doing this. Okay, great. We are still perfect on timing because this is the last topic of the report, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we have this question. This question got so many responses in the report. So I did my best to try to find the biggest parts of most important parts of this question. But the question is, how do you tell compelling stories without contributing to stereotyping? I think this is probably something we've all considered at some point. One recommendation that I love is to tell the story of one. So sometimes when you use vast generalizations about a community, that actually can serve to perpetuate stereotypes. Instead, consider telling the story of one. And the thing is, this is a strategy that is super compelling because people have a really hard time conceptualizing large numbers, right? Maybe your program helps 10,000 people, but when you tell the story of one person that's found success, that's how you're going to actually humanize your mission. Second, you want to avoid deficit-based language. I know we've talked a lot about strength-based, deficit-based language so far, but really when you're considering words, word use, you want to avoid words like disadvantaged or underserved, because those do conjure stereotypes. We already talked about that golden rule from earlier. Remember that when you are writing your stories, just picture if you're the one that's being described in the story, and if that is how you would like to be, and just remind yourself, is this how I'd like to have my story told? Okay, one aspect of ethical storytelling that I have learned recently is that the way a person refers to themselves is the strength-based way. I really love this because when you are deciding to when you're actually using someone's direct quote, you're simply just giving them the microphone. We already talked about how much I love that. So that is, just something that we really support here at MemoryFox. And finally, or I'm sorry, a couple more. Oh no, this is the last one. So then one cool thing about ethical storytelling is that you can reframe a message to find a common ground between your storyteller and your donor, instead of having a message that is about division. So that sounds maybe a little abstract, but I have an example for you. Erica Spence talked about this in the report. She said, when you're thinking about talking from a food bank, she works at a Central Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida. She said, does a donor know what standing in line for food is like? Maybe not. But do they know what it feels like to share a warm meal with family during the holidays? More likely. So instead of listing the myriad challenges facing the person asking for food, try to humanize their situation by focusing on shared feelings and values. I thought that was such an amazing sentiment, and I hope that you all get something from that and you're able to maybe do some reframing. Okay, that's all of the ethical storytelling topics. And I do want to just wrap up this session with some quick top six report takeaways. So if I had to just say the top 6 things that I learned from this report, here they are. Number 1, this is a journey, not a destination. Please keep going, keep learning, keep trying. I love this part. There is an immense power in elevating diverse stories. We already talked about giving the community a microphone. This is such a good, important reminder. Number 3 is that it's okay to break the rules. And in fact, thank you all for coming today, because we're actually starting to rewrite these together, right? 4th is that transparency and kindness will always serve you. When you are working with any storyteller, when you're working at a nonprofit in general, having transparency, being kind, that's always going to help you on your ethical storytelling journey. I said it once, I'll say it again, I'll say it probably many, many more times, but consent, consent, consent. And finally, I think for the most part, when you work at a nonprofit, you kind of know what feels icky. And if you think that something feels icky when it comes to your storytelling, it probably is, which means it's probably worth reevaluating. So thank you all for coming to my takeaways from the Ethical Storytelling Report. If you have not had a chance to download a copy, I would love it if you would do so now. Go ahead, get your copy. You can read all of these insights. All of this is in there. Yes, it is a 74-page report, but I promise, it is so worth the read. I also want to let you know that we actually have been doing a quarterly panel series called Narratives with Integrity. Our next one is taking place on June 11th. I would love it if you would join me there. We're going to be talking about building a culture of ethical storytelling with some of these really big powerhouses that have been doing this for many, many years. So we have Kylie Lyman from Horizons National, we have Floyd Jones, we have Josefina Casati, and we have Kristen Supra. They all have very unique perspectives, and they all have done an incredible job. So I hope to see you there. And then finally, like I mentioned at the top of the hour, I really hope you will take my survey about this webinar. I would love to hear how you think this session can be improved, what you loved about the session, what you learned. And also, if you're interested in being a part of our survey when we do it again in December, please take out that webinar, or please take our webinar survey. And then finally, last but not least, I have a goodie bag for you. It's got an exclusive offer for everybody that is attending the session today. We're going to do a $250 donation to your nonprofit when you become a MemoryFox customer. And that offer does have a deadline. It does end at the end of June. So it'd be so wonderful if we could make some donations to your nonprofits. Please, please, please check it out. And I hope that you check out the goodie bag, book a time with a storyteller. That goodie bag's also got a bunch of other information in it. So everything about those panels, we got Canva templates, we got ethical storytelling articles. And thank you so much. Now I'm going to see, it looks like we did have a couple questions that came in during the session. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to answer a couple of the questions that came in. Great. Okay, so it looks like I've got a question that says, will this PowerPoint be available as well as the recording? Okay, yes, if you registered for the event, I will send you a PDF of the slides as well as the recording of the session. So that is going to check your inbox and you can see that shortly. Another question we had, what's the best way to get group consent? Okay, great. So I talked a little bit about this. Thank you for asking. We would say that the best way to get group consent is definitely when someone is registering for your event. So if you're having an event that is maybe a 5K and somebody has to register to attend, right? Part of your registration form can just be letting people know, you know, we're going to be having photographers at the event. We're going to be taking video of the event. And is it okay if we have your consent to please be in those videos and photos? Let people know during registration, let people know at the event, and then while they're signing into your group event, maybe while they are like showing up to let you know they've come, like at your gala, for example, just reconfirm that consent. Let them remind them again, let them know that that's something that will be happening. And okay, looks like, okay, one more question. If the location they choose is not conducive to a good interview, lighting or noise, or if you're interviewing them over the phone or video, oh, what if? Okay, that's a good point. I would say that a good way to go about that, okay, so you're referencing when I said let the storyteller choose where they have the interview. I still think that is a good rule of thumb, and I would still recommend that, but maybe one way you could help steer the conversation to be somewhere that is conducive to an interview. Let them know ahead of time, these are some things that we need to keep in mind. So we'll need to keep in mind, you know, like you said, the lighting. So maybe if they know that the lighting, if you know the lighting might not be great where they have chosen, you know, you could bring your own lighting, you could bring a ring light. Or you could just let them know, you know, we would be interested in somewhere with a little more lighting if they have maybe a lamp you could move in front of them or something along those lines. Similar with noise. Before I even started this session today, I was telling Jade, you know, I have to shut my windows because I live on a street that's very loud. That's something that I take into consideration, but maybe others aren't aware of that. So sometimes if you just let people know, these are some things that we'd like you to be aware of before we conduct an interview. Then they can go ahead and make arrangements for that. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so like I said, thank you all so much for joining today. This has been such a joy. Again, please answer our survey. Please check out that goodie bag, get that special offer. If anybody is interested in learning more about MemoryFox, I would love to stick around for a couple more minutes and I can tell you a little bit more about MemoryFox specifically. So again, thank you all. And I'm gonna hop into just a few words about MemoryFox. So one thing that we love to talk about when it comes to MemoryFox is if someone asks, what is your mission? Can you actually show them? And you might be wondering, you know, I don't actually think I can show them. I don't know if I have a good way to show people. And when that happens, I'd want to ask you, you know, what is stopping you from being able to show people your mission? We find that the nonprofits we work with often say one of three things. It can be that they feel collecting content from their community is like pulling teeth. It can be that they think organizing content is frustrating or really time consuming. Or maybe it's that they just need a more efficient and modern way to actually share their stories. So that's where MemoryFox comes in. We actually created a technology platform that addresses all three of these pain points head on. So we have a collection tool, we have a story bank that helps you stay organized, and then we have plenty of share options. Some really cool stuff about us is that we are integrated with Canva. So as you probably know, Canva for nonprofits is free. So we highly recommend that you grab one of those free accounts and get your MemoryFox account connected with that. As you already know from attending this session, this tool is built to tell stories authentically and ethically. And when it comes to pricing, we actually offer an equitable pricing model. So it is based on your $9.90, based on how big your organization is. But the thing is, you really don't have to take our word for it. We have a lot of customers that have said really great things about what MemoryFox does. We have Manchester University. They said, you know, MemoryFox has made it so easy to collect and organize videos, including from members of our community whom we wouldn't have otherwise been able to reach. I mean, that's huge, right? Being able to tap into new voices. REITs across America, they said, you know, MemoryFox makes it easy to collect thousands of pieces of content from replaying events across the nation. We love using this tool to support our mission. And then our friends at the Community Foundation of Brent and St. Lucie, they have this beautiful story page that shows all of their scholarship stories that they can wrap up and send to all of their donors. They said, hey, using MemoryFox helps us efficiently capture more stories from scholars. This tool has taken us to a new level. So if you are interested in learning more about MemoryFox, I really pull this slide back up. I would love it if you would connect with a MemoryFox storyteller today. Go ahead and scan that QR code. Check out that goodie bag. And I think that is everything I have for you today. So thank you all so much for coming. This has been wonderful, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to go ahead and end this recording.